happened in sort of the last 20, 25 minutes of that match that allowed you to take control?
I think I told myself that I wasn't tired enough. And I think, and I told this to my team that I wasn't finishing the points tired enough. So maybe the intensity went down a little bit, and I tried my best to give that little extra push every single point, and it paid off.
That extra push is something that you talked to us a little bit about in my...
All eyes are on Alex Eala as she opens her 2026 Italian Open campaign against Poland's Magdalena Frech in the round of 128 at the Foro Italico in Rome. It's a clash between two top 50 players, Eala at world number 42, Frech at world number 45, both looking to snap out of recent slumps.
Alex Eala became the talk of the town after just one match in Rome. The buzz around her abruptly increased after an outstanding performance against Magdalena Frech. Legends like Rafael Nadal are allegedly now stepping in to offer guidance that most young players could only hope to receive. It doesn't just happen. One major question is raised by this. What precisely did Nadal perceive in Eala that persuaded him that she might pose a serious danger on clay? All eyes are on the rising Filipino star as she takes against Frech in the opening round of the 2026 Italian Open at the Foro Italico. Eala, who was ranked 42nd in the world, and Frech, who was ranked 45th, came to Rome in a desperate attempt to improve their patchy performance. Early round clay court victories are typically quickly forgotten, but occasionally a single performance grabs the interest of former winners. Everything can change at those times. A possible second-round game between Eala and Wang Xinyu is already being discussed as one of the most fascinating matchups in Rome, which only heightens the excitement behind the scenes. With a 15-11 record this season, including a runner-up finish in Auckland and a significant victory over world number 13 at the Australian Open, Wang comes in ranked 33rd in the world. Her clay season, however, has been much less compelling. Includes an unexpected defeat to a player not in the top 170 in Madrid. Fans and experts think Eala might have a genuine chance to make another statement on one of tennis' greatest platforms because of this contrast. Wang Xinhua's form has been erratic going into Rome, particularly on clay, where confidence can vanish as fast as momentum. She was hoping for a breakout performance at the Italian Open, having only managed a few victories. Performance that can rekindle her season and lead to a significant matchup with Elena Rybakina. Alex Eala, however, discreetly found herself in the ideal position to completely alter the conversation as attention was divided between a number of emerging stars. Oddly enough, it was no longer solely about the scores on the scoreboard. During the Italian Open's opening round on May 5th, two players entered the clay court with entirely different demands. With fans from the Philippines and tennis enthusiasts from all over the world following her every step, Eala had a rapidly expanding worldwide fan base going into the match. Even well-known tennis commentators and creators had begun to closely monitor her ascent after noticing a shift in her style of play this season. Magdalena Frech had a 5-match losing skid when she arrived in Rome, so the draw had also offered her a chance. Eala, on the other hand, had quietly gained momentum throughout the year, winning games regularly despite a minor decline in rankings brought on by Miami's inability to protect points. Even so, many thought that returning to the top 30 would be her next great move. Eala played calmly and confidently from the start of the game, taking charge of the rhythm right away. Beneath the surface, however, this was about much more than just winning the first round. On clay, a surface that had never really welcomed her game, one player was struggling to establish she really belonged. The other was attempting to break a losing run that was beginning to feel perilously long-lasting. On paper, it appeared to be a low-key contest between players in their 40s. In actuality, it seemed like the kind of match that subtly alters careers. After winning, Eala acknowledged how emotional the occasion was for her, describing it as her first triumph in Rome and stating that it demonstrated how far she and her team had come in the previous 12 months. More significantly, she disclosed that the hard effort behind the scenes was finally starting to show in actual competition. For many who were closely observing, this sounded less like relief and more like a warning to the remainder of the tour. Magdalena Frech, a player whose recent performance felt more like a warning sign than a passing slump, stood across the net. Frech had risen into the top 25 just over a year prior, establishing herself as one of the toughest rivals on the circuit thanks to her unwavering consistency and mental toughness. Her strategy was never based on spectacular victories or overpowering strength. Rather, She was an expert at drawing opponents into tiresome rallies where they had to make one more shot before their irritation finally overcame them. When she was at her finest, she used matches as slow-burning traps that gradually wore players down. However, tennis can be quite harsh, particularly for players whose greater identity rests on resilience and self-assurance. The impact is severe when that faith vanishes. Every choice, every protest, and every stressful time is impacted. In Rome, Eala encountered that particular Frech. However, it is necessary to look beyond the clay court outcomes to comprehend why Eala handled the situation so admirably. On the surface, it may appear that she was still having trouble adjusting to clay after previous defeats in Stuttgart and Madrid. However, a more significant development was concealed inside those setbacks. Eala was developing her ability to move more naturally on the surface, create points more methodically, and maintain composure during lengthy physical interactions. These changes are crucial at this level, even though they might not necessarily show up right away in the win-loss column. That development became unavoidable in opposition to Frech. Magdalena was obviously unconfident going into the match, and Eala never relaxed once she felt her opponent losing control. The 6-0 set was particularly stunning because of this. In tennis, it's not always as simple as it seems to win a set 6-0, particularly when the players are of similar skill levels. When the leading player loses focus and the opponent suddenly swings freely with nothing left to lose, a dominant start can occasionally truly turn deadly. Tennis matchups where one player dominates the first set only for the other to dominate the second are quite prevalent at all levels of the sport, and momentum can change in a matter of minutes. However, Eala evaded that trap entirely. She never gave Frech the opportunity she sorely needed to restart the fight, remained emotionally locked in, and continued to be aggressive. More people in the tennis world are starting to pay close attention to that level of maturity, especially from such a young player on clay. And early in the second set, that is precisely what took place. After surviving the match's tough opening stretch, Magdalena Frech abruptly elevated her game, playing with significantly more aggression and confidence. Eala was starting to see firsthand how quickly momentum can change against more seasoned clay court players. However, instead of being overwhelmed, she appeared to be a player who was gradually learning and adjusting. Her performance was captivating because of this. There have been indications that her clay game was changing underground even before Rome. Her victory over a seasoned opponent in Madrid showed glimpses of what she might develop into on clay, especially in the manner she started building rallies patiently rather than forcing victories too soon. There were noticeable changes occurring even in the games she lost. She was learning how to defend more shrewdly, move more naturally, and accept rather than resist the physical demands of the surface. These are the specifics that frequently distinguish short-term success from long-term expansion. The actual game began with a little but crucial tactical change. Eala didn't enter the competition as a young player merely attempting to make it through on clay. She positioned herself aggressively on return from the first games, stepping inside the baseline whenever she could and viewing every second as a chance to attack. Frech, whose serve depends much more on location and rhythm than raw power, was immediately put under strain by that choice. Eala's timing and reflexes make it an invitation for a returner to seize points early. Every slower serve turned into an opportunity to attack the subsequent shot, reroute angles, and put Frech in awkward defensive situations. That aggressive approach can occasionally backfire against heavy power hitters, but it proved to be a significant strategic benefit against a guy like Frech. Eala had a strong 16-11 season record and was ranked 42nd in the world going into Rome. Her most successful tournament run had occurred earlier in Dubai, where she advanced to the WTA 1000 event quarterfinals before falling in straight sets to Coco Gauff. But a few weeks later, in Indian Wells, she astonished Gauff, who was then ranked 4th in the world, with her most notable triumph. Of course, there had also been challenging times during the season, such as a disappointing defeat at the Australian Open to a player who was not in the top 90. Even though she had won a crucial match in Madrid before losing the next round, her clay form had been uneven going into Rome. However, the longer rallies against Frech made it harder to ignore the two players' more profound differences. By prolonging rallies and waiting for errors, Frech tried to revert to her typical patterns of consistency and depth. However, something about her game seemed a little strange. Eala had the chance to go forward, manage exchanges, and gradually seize control of the game from the baseline because balls that typically landed dangerously close to it were suddenly falling shorter into the court. Magdalena Frech's defensive retrievals, which typically kept her alive during rallies, started to become less effective against the majority of opponents. It's possible that these modest margins were missed. They soon turned threatening against Eala. Eala played with patience and clarity rather than forcing the movement, displaying a level of poise that was well above her familiarity with clay. Frech's rhythm was sometimes disturbed by the awkward angles caused by her left-handed style, particularly on the ad side where her serve inevitably drew opponents wide off the court. Players had to continuously modify their placement on clay since spin and bounce intensified certain patterns. Frech's entire approach relies on staying steady and balanced over lengthy exchanges, but once that framework started to break, it became much more difficult to keep the rest of her game together. Eala instantly recognized the time and launched an unreserved attack. In that direction, the first set developed flawlessly. Frech's service games were routinely neutralized by Eala's returns, which forced the rallies into physical altercations where the Filipina's shot selection and patience gradually began to take control. It was neither overwhelming might nor careless aggressiveness. One rally at a time, the controlled pressure was applied until the scoreboard subtly showed the difference. Despite winning the first set, Eala acknowledged after the match how mentally taxing the fight had been.